Well, we did every Major League team's worst player, and you guys seemed to enjoy that. And I also got positive feedback regarding the idea for this video, every team's best player. So, let's go ahead and do that today. The rules are going to be the exact same as with the worst player, so if you didn't see that video, I'm only considering guys that played at least a third of the season for their respective club, so that they actually had a chance to play enough games to make a meaningful impact on their team. After all, a guy that throws up a 900 OPS over, let's say, 35 games, obviously won't be nearly as valuable as a guy who throws up an 850 over 140. With that minimum being mentioned, I will also say that there probably will be a bias towards players who played more games, because of the simple fact that it's easier to rack up value when you're in more contests, as well as my own personal stance that availability is in itself a skill. Our second rule is that the player in question didn't have to finish the season with the team that he began it on, nor does he currently have to be on the team that I selected them for. The performances of the players on the squads exist in a vacuum statistically, so anything outside of that shouldn't really be taken into account in my opinion. The same is also true of postseason success, for example, which will be relevant for a couple guys. With that being said, let's go west to east today, starting with the NL and the face of Major League Baseball in Shohei Ohtani for the Los Angeles Dodgers. Now, on a team with more than a few Hall of Famers who also happen to play the field, it might have come as a surprise entering the season that Shohei could manage to rack up more value than all of these guys while not even throwing a single pitch. But don't get me wrong, that's exactly what he did, nearly doubling the next closest in WAR on the squad at 9.2 to Mookie Betts' 4.8. This also came with 54 home runs, 59 stolen bases, a 190 OPS+, the best of his eventual Hall of Fame career, and league-leading totals in on-base percentage, slugging percentage, OPS, total bases, runs, RBI, and the aforementioned home runs. It doesn't get much more easy than this, as Ohtani will more than likely win his first NL and third overall MVP this offseason. The Padres definitely surpassed expectations of them coming into the 2024 season, but did so without any truly insane production from any one player. With that being said, Manny Machado, Jurickson Profar, Michael King, and Dylan Cease all had standout campaigns, but none of them were quite as well-rounded as 20-year-old rookie center fielder Jackson Merrill, who actually led the team in WAR at 4.4 while finishing second on the squad in home runs, RBI, stolen bases, and runs, as well as third in OPS+. His fielding was even pretty decent from somebody who had never spent significant time in center field before this season. He'll most assuredly finish top 2 in Rookie of the Year voting and could very easily take home the award over fellow rookie phenom Paul Skeens, who we'll come to in a second. The D-backs fell short of a playoff spot a year after going to the World Series, despite winning 5 more games, an overall disappointing outcome for a franchise that definitely seems to be on the rise. With that being said, there was one player on their team that stood heads and shoulders above the rest, and that was All-Star Ketel Marte, who crushed 36 home runs with a 292, 372, 560 slash, and 155 OPS+. He even exactly doubled the next closest position player's WAR at a mark of 6.8. If he hadn't gotten hurt for periods in both August and September, he almost certainly would be finishing top 2 in MVP voting, and still will more than likely find himself in the top 5 regardless. The underperforming Giants, who finished a game under 500, saw almost all of their standout production come from a couple guys, being Heliot Ramos, Tyler Fitzgerald, Blake Snell, Logan Webb, and their offseason acquisition that they recently signed to a huge extension, and my personal choice here for their best player of the year, Matt Chapman. Now, while his hitting peripherals don't necessarily look all that great, as an OPS of 790 certainly isn't superstar level production, his overall WAR of 7.1 certainly was, courtesy of doing everything that he did do at the plate in Oracle, which helped him to a 125 OPS+, and his truly outstanding Gold Glove defense. San Francisco certainly has a lot to figure out before next season, but one thing they can be sure of is who's going to take every single rep at third base for the foreseeable future. Finishing out the West, we have the Rockies, who actually had 2 players that were, in my opinion, neck and neck for this, as you can make solid cases for both Ezekiel Tovar and Brenton Doyle, both who had extremely impressive defensive seasons while being surprisingly above average hitters. But, as almost all their numbers are similar, I'm going to have to give the edge to Doyle here, since he managed to swipe 24 more bases while having the slight edge in on-base percentage, OPS, and total WAR, as his total of 4.0 in this regard paced the entire team. This is a truly depressing squad when examining their prospects at being a relevant winning team again, but this duo of strong position players should provide them at least something to build around going forward. The National League Centrals led off by the Brewers, who actually had a host of above-average performers on the roster, with many of them being under 27 years old as well. And while I will acknowledge the impressive play of Willy Adames, Jackson Chourio, Bryce Terang, and the abbreviated campaign posted by Christian Yelich, this has to go to William Contreras here, considering the fact that he led the team in OPS, doubles, and runs, all while providing solid defense as a catcher. In the overall MLB today, he's probably a top 3 backstop, and arguably in the top 2, which, to me, easily makes him the best player overall in the Brew Crew. With the amount of superstar names on the Cardinals, you probably would have expected coming into this season that the player I'd be talking about would be a Goldschmidt or an Arenado, but neither one of these guys even finished in the top 3 in total WAR on their team, with both of them finishing behind Wilson Contreras, who only played 84 games. And yes, while what Contreras did was impressive in a limited sample size, he probably wasn't the best overall player on the team. That would have to go to rookie shortstop Mason Wynn, who in 150 games paired Gold Glove level defense as a shortstop with league average hitting, helping him to a team leading WAR of 4.9. I do want to also give a shout out here to Ryan Helsley, who had one of the best seasons for any reliever in Major League Baseball, en route to posting an insane 2.06 ERA plus and locking down 49 saves. Now, Chicago was a very difficult one for me, as in my opinion you can make solid cases for at least 4 different guys, being Ian Happ, Seiya Suzuki, Shota Imanaga, and who I'm going to eventually end up going with, Dansby Swanson. Now, the difference between all these players is marginal, but I personally value how Dansby was probably the best fielding shortstop in the big leagues per advanced analytics, with him having 14 OAA to go along with the team leading WAR of 4.0 and perfectly league average hitting. Another factor that separates him from the rest is the fact that his base running was also surprisingly elite, as his 3-runner runs per Baseball Savant had him in the 96th percentile in Major League Baseball, despite not having far above average sprint speed. I honestly couldn't fault you here for picking any one of the other players, but for my 2 cents, I do think Dansby has the edge here by a small amount. The Reds bring with them a deceptively close matchup, as on the surface you might think Elly De La Cruz and his 25 home runs, 67 stolen bases, 809 OPS, and elite defense from a shortstop would be a slam dunk here, in terms of declaring him the best player on the team. But perhaps one player who ended up flying a little bit under the radar was starting pitcher Hunter Green, who actually led the team in overall WAR at 6.3. Though I will acknowledge that it is hard to compare these marks between position players and pitchers. Still, a 2.75 ERA, just over 1 WHIP, and 10 strikeouts per 9 over 150 innings were certainly impressive, and probably would have netted him a top 3 Cy Young finish had he not gotten injured. Still, even with that being said, I think I'm going to have to go with Elly here. His overall maturation as a player in his early 20s honestly couldn't have been much more impressive, even if he definitely needs to cut down on those 218 strikeouts. Like I alluded to when talking about the Padres, the only correct choice here for the 2024 Pirates is rookie phenom Paul Skeens, who was quite simply a revelation, throwing up a 1.96 ERA in 133 innings to go along with an insane 170 strikeouts in that time, and a truly otherworldly, record-setting 2.14 ERA+. If he had managed to throw more than 162 innings, this would have easily led the major leagues, and also would have probably seen him finish at least top 3 in Cy Young voting. Basically, every single stat that defines a pitcher's performance had him as an elite outlier performer, and his repertoire of at least 4+ pitches should allow him to continue to perform at this level for years to come. Our final division of the National League is led off by the Phillies, who had a couple impressive performances by position players worth mentioning, including that of team leader Bryce Harper and absolute masher of baseball's Kyle Schwarber, among a few others like Trey Turner and Brandon Marsh. But quite simply, nobody was as impressive as starting pitcher Zach Wheeler, who managed to post career bests in ERA, ERA+, WHIP, and hits per 9, all while finishing among the league leaders in those categories as well. His consistency atop the rotation certainly helped quell some of the chaos that the Phillies encountered throughout the year, even if he couldn't manage to save things by himself in the end. While the Mets certainly did have a host of surprising contributors in Mark Vientos, Jose Iglesias, Luis Severino, and Sean Manaea, as well as the old mainstays like Pete Alonso and Brandon Nimmo, inevitably the only real choice here for their best player has to go to the guy who was, for much of the summer, actually considered in contention for the MVP award, due to the overall nature of their game. Francisco Lindor and his 7 WAR, which was more than double the Mets' next closest position player. This came with team-leading totals in stolen bases, RBI, runs, hits, OPS, and OPS+, while he finished second on the team with 33 round trippers. But what might be overall the most elite aspect of his game is the absolute insanity he's able to whip up with his glove, as his 16 out above average and 12 fielding run value both ranked in the 96th percentile or above in Major League Baseball. He's quite simply one of the most complete players in our game today, and is on a Hall of Fame trajectory if he's able to keep up what he's been doing over the next 5 to 7 years. If I told you before the season began that the Braves wouldn't see Olsen, Riley, Acuna Jr., or Strider in real contention for this spot, you probably would have called me crazy, and rightfully so. But most of these guys dealt with serious injuries as well as bouts of underperformance, essentially undermining almost all of their created value. With that being said, this isn't meant to take away from the Triple Crown Cy Young winning level brilliance that Chris Sale posted throughout the entire campaign, as he basically led the league in every relevant rate stat, as well as a few cumulative ones, all while tossing in an All-Star appearance and a Gold Glove. And funny enough, despite missing a few of his starts near the end of the season, he still paced the entire team in WAR by almost 2, finishing at 6.2 to Ozuna from the Braves' 4.3. The Nationals saw a number of their players take a step forward in 2024, with the most notable among these being CJ Abrams and his 2020 season that also included a 110 OPS plus with the team leading 20 home runs and 3.4 WAR. Yes, his advanced numbers on defense were pretty atrocious, but considering his elite athleticism, this is more than likely something he can improve upon, though it is an open question whether or not he'll manage to hold this spot next year after we get full seasons from prospect phenoms Dylan Cruz and James Woods. It's hard to talk about excellence and the Marlins in the same sentence, as honestly, there weren't many bright spots in a year that saw them post one of their worst seasons in franchise history. But among the turd heap of veterans that would be traded and former top prospects who washed out, you had the impressive performance of Xavier Edwards, a guy who only managed to play 70 games, yet in those contests managed to post the second best WAR on the team at 2.0, and led the team in stolen bases. He did all this while logging an impressive 328, 397, 423 slash, coming out to a 124 OPS plus, a truly impressive number for a guy who only managed to hit one home run during that time. Since he's only 24 years old, he could easily end up being one of Miami's foundational pieces moving forward, that is, if they're actually able to build a foundation around him. We come to the American League now and the Houston Astros. Now, this one is tough for one big reason. The Astros' best player undoubtedly this season was Kyle Tucker, whose 4.7 WAR through just 78 games had him on track for a near 10 total over a full season. He also backed it up with a 181 OPS plus, 993 OPS, and 23 home runs, all in that same limited sample size. But considering that he did miss over half the season, Yordan Alvarez, who was no slouch at the plate either, with a 172 OPS plus, 35 dingers, an impressive 308, 392, 567 slash, has to be our choice here. It will be interesting to see if Tucker can continue his rate of production over a full season in 2025. But if he can manage to do so, he will certainly take this spot by the end of that year. The Mariners are a team that lacked any real outlier performances, unlike in years past when Julio Rodriguez provided significant electricity. But while his 2024 ended up being a pretty decent season, it wasn't quite as good as that of catcher Cal Raleigh, who paired the most home runs on both his squad and among all MLB catchers with an overall very impressive 119 OPS plus, and an incredible performance when it came to fielding run value, tallying 14 in this regard, a 98th percentile total, courtesy of some of the best framing in all of Major League Baseball, leading to him winning his first career Gold Glove. While this definitely is Julio's spot to reclaim, or honestly any one of the major horses that they have in the rotation, there's no reason to believe that backstop Riley can continue to dominate at this level for at least the next few years, as the 27-year-old has actually managed to increase his home run total per season every year since his debut in 2021. The Rangers offer one of the more straightforward selections of the day, as shortstop Corey Seager, despite missing 40 games, still led the team in overall WAR at 5.0, home runs at 30, OPS plus at 145, and slugging percentage at 512. He basically replicated most of his lofty career norms while also registering an All-Star appearance. While it was definitely a bit of a step back from his second-place MVP finish the prior season, the Rangers certainly would take this level of production every year for the remainder of his contract, along with, hopefully, the inclusion of a few more games played. The A's, for being a team that only won 69 games, certainly had a host of highlighted performers, including the dominant Mason Miller and breakout bats in Lawrence Butler, JJ Bleday, and Shea Langoliers. But none of these guys had quite the level of ridiculous production that their 30-year-old DH had, as Brent Rooker proceeded to not only pace the team in WAR at 5.6, even while playing very few games in the field, but also led the team in pretty much every other major offensive category, with his 39 home runs, 927 OPS, and 165 OPS plus being the big standout numbers here. The only question really this offseason is if he's going to actually make the trip out to Sacramento by the time the season starts, as his value as a trade piece seemingly couldn't be any higher than it is now. In a perfect world, the Angels would still be seeing 10 WAR seasons by Mike Trout, while managing to actually contend for a playoff spot some of the time. But, sadly, we don't live in that perfect world, and the result of that was just 29 games played for the Angels' future Hall of Famer, though he did manage to tally a still impressive 1.1 WAR in that time frame. Due to his now constant injuries, he more than likely won't be fronting a list like this anytime soon. But you know who might be? Star sophomore shortstop Zach Neto, whose own mark of 5.1 WAR not only led the squad, but almost doubled that of its next closest performer in Logan O'Hoppe. This came with an impressive 23 home runs, 30 stolen bases, and 113 OPS plus. And while reviews on his fielding are certainly mixed, as DRS has him as a far above average shortstop, while Outs Above Average has him as a far below average shortstop, the median combined perspective is basically that he can stick up the middle long term, providing the Halos their first consistent guy there since Andrelton Simmons in the mid-2010s. The Guardians certainly had a number of valuable contributors on their 93-win squad, but frankly, none of them came even close to the insanity that was Jose Ramirez and his near 40-40 season, with 39 dingers, 41 stolen bases, and an 872 OPS to boot. And to be honest, it probably would be easier to list the things he didn't lead the team in than the things that he did, with basically every major offensive category being Jose fronted besides triples, walks, and OBP, which he was still among the leaders in. He truly is building a Hall of Fame caliber career at this point, and it'll be fascinating to see if the threshold that he came so close to eclipsing in 2024, being the 40-40 club, actually does get surpassed in the upcoming season. The Royals bring with them arguably even a bigger slam dunk than Jose, as Bobby Witt Jr. didn't just lead all position players in wins above replacement on the team, he more than tripled the next closest, with his mark of 9.4 being one of the best totals we've seen from a shortstop this century. This was courtesy of some of the best fielding in baseball, which netted him a Gold Glove, some of the best hitting in baseball, which saw him win a batting title while swatting 32 homers, and the second most stolen bases on the team with 31. On top of all of that excellence, he also threw up 11 triples, making him one of the few members of the 40 double, 10 triple, 30 home run, and 30 stolen base club. This guy basically played like if prime Mike Trout was a shortstop, and you know what might be even more impressive? All of the advanced numbers backed up that this was thoroughly repeatable in both 2025 and beyond. The Tigers had a surprisingly good squad in 2024, one that managed to sneak into the playoffs courtesy of one of the hotter streaks in recent baseball history. However, they did a lot of this with the help of the entire squad versus any one big name. Aside from a few being Riley Green, Kerry Carpenter, and our inevitable selection for this list, who is arguably the best pitcher in baseball right now, Tarik Skubal. The big lefty managed to win the AL Triple Crown with an impressive 18 wins, 2.39 ERA, and 228 strikeouts through nearly 200 innings. He's the best Detroit pitcher since Justin Verlander, and considering this was his first season that he's actually pitched over 140 innings in the big leagues, there still somehow might be more development yet to come. What can you even say about the Twins? 3 of their top 5 performers in WAR finished with less than 102 games played, and routed them missing the playoffs after at one point in September still having a 95% chance of making them. With that being said, I would probably have to give this title to shortstop Carlos Correa, who, despite playing in only 86 games himself, led the team in total wins above replacement and OPS plus at 152, to go along with his customary impressive fielding as a shortstop. Now, was this season worth $33 million? Probably not, just by virtue of games played. But if by some miracle he can actually manage to stay healthy over a full season next year, we could be looking at a dark horse MVP candidate, especially if Minnesota somehow finds a way back to the postseason. I do also want to shout out Byron Buxton and Matt Wallner here for their own impressive abbreviated campaigns as well. The 41 and 121 Chicago White Sox obviously saw very few positive contributors this past season, but they did have 2 notable starter standouts along the way. Eric Fedde, who actually posted the highest cumulative WAR on the entire team, even though he pitched only 121 innings before being traded, and my personal selection here, Garrett Crochet. While a couple of his numbers lagged behind Eric, Garrett basically lapped him in a couple key ones, including total innings pitched, strikeouts by over 100 somehow, and Ks per 9, with an unholy total of 12.9 while walking just 2 batters per 9 as well. When it's all said and done, few pitchers were as electric as Chicago's big lefty, though, much like Rooker, it seems highly likely that a trade away from the South Side is inevitable over this offseason. The Yankees take us into our final division of the video, with another easy choice, with all due respect to the other top 3 MVP finisher in Juan Soto, as Aaron Judge had quite simply one of the best seasons by a Major League hitter we've ever seen, including a 223 OPS plus, literal Barry Bonds territory, along with Major League leading totals in home runs, RBI, walks, on-base percentage, slugging percentage, OPS, and intentional walks. To top it all off, the guy nearly won the Triple Crown, as he actually batted .322 to complement those 58 long balls. Yes, I know his postseason performance was all-time levels of bad, but that shouldn't take away from a season that will be being talked about decades from now as one of the better position player campaigns in Major League Baseball history. Can you believe that the Orioles witnessed their young shortstop Gunnar Henderson post an over 9 WAR with 37 homers, 21 stolen bases, and a 159 OPS plus, yet not finish in the top 3 of MVP voting? This just goes to show how deep the class was this year, but that shouldn't take anything away from what Henderson did, as he in many respects stayed neck and neck with Witt for a large portion of the season in terms of production, and honestly didn't finish all that far off him by year's end. Considering that this was just his sophomore campaign as a 23-year-old, the sky is seemingly the limit for a player that I could easily see winning multiple MVPs before they hang up their cleats. Remember when I mentioned that deep MVP class? Do you want to know another player that was excluded from the top 3 as a result of it? The Red Sox' Jared Duran, who led the majors in doubles and triples while posting his own 2020 All-Star campaign with nearly 9 more to boot. But you know what might be even more crazy? Advanced stats might have loved him even more than traditional ones, as his base running value of 6 and fielding run value of 12 both were above the 95th percentile, which makes him, as a center fielder, one of the more valuable players in baseball before he even steps in the box. Controversy aside, this guy is going to be the face of the Red Sox for a long time, even with Rafael Devers still on the team. If you ask anyone midway through the 2023 season who was going to be the Rays' most valuable player for the next 5 seasons at minimum, they would have responded without question, Wander Franco. But seeing as how he's since been criminally charged with a host of crimes in association with an underage girl, he certainly won't be playing even a single game for them going forward. This leaves some of the slimmest pickings of this entire video, as there was nobody on their team that had a truly great season, or honestly, even a really good one. This was reflected by the fact that they didn't have a single guy on their team eclipse even the 3 WAR mark. But one guy who I guess got remotely close, along with a couple other impressive hitting numbers, was second baseman Brandon Lowe, who finished basically top 3 in every major offensive category on the squad despite playing only 107 games. This included leading the team in slugging percentage at .473 and home runs at 21. We now come to the final team in our video, putting a period on this list with a satisfying slam dunk choice here, in Vladimir Guerrero Jr., though I do also want to acknowledge the impressive play of Dalton Varsho, Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, Ernie Clement, Jose Barrios, and Kevin Gossman. But when it was all said and done, no one came close to the domination that Guerrero provided, as he led the team in basically every major offensive category, while finishing among the league leaders in batting average, on-base percentage, OPS, and OPS+, nearly replicating his career high from 3 years ago at 166. This was a huge step forward for the first baseman, who was seeing a steep decline in his overall value since finishing second in the MVP race in 2021, even as the rest of the team kinda crumbled around him. Alright, that was every Major League team's best player from 2024. Be sure to let me know in the comments if I got any of these wrong and who you would have picked instead. Additionally, I want to throw out 3 video ideas that I'm considering doing next in this format, and I want you to tell me which one sounds the best to you. Every MLB team's biggest prospect bust of all time, every MLB team's best player of all time, and every MLB team's most disappointing player of 2024. Now, thank you so much for watching, hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.